Next and the first session of the day, the multitude of climate subsectors bring with them unique innovations across a plethora of themes. Our upcoming session delves into the next wave of innovations which could lead climate tech investing in the coming years. From food-focused bioscience to carbon credits, we explore the innovations within climate tech as investors align their thesis to match climate-led innovations. To shed light on the same, I'd like to invite on stage our session panelists, Mona Kachwaha, partner at UC Empower, Rajiv P. Kapahi, co-founder at Paranama, Sameer Shah, managing partner at Peak Venture Partners, Suken Shah, principal investment officer at Neef Fund, Vikram Dileepan, director at Lok Capital, and the session will be moderated by Vatsal Dusad, vice president at Avana Capital. Over to you, Vatsal. Thank you.
Hello all. I think we're still filling the room from the lunch. So the topic for today's panel is funding the next frontiers of climate. And while we discuss the future and how the climatic innovations are shaping up, we will also spend some time today reflecting on where we are and how did we reach here. And to kickstart the panel, my first question to everybody essentially is that if you can just walk through your individual journeys on how did it converge to climate, when and how did it start, and what have been your key takeaways in that journey?
I'll speak, of course, for my fund and my team as a whole. I'm part of Unitas Capital's flagship fund called UC Empower. It's a new fund and a new team that has come together to focus on two sectors, and climate is one of them. So our rationale and pathway to focusing on this has been a result of what the group has done as a whole and the individual partners, what our journeys have been. And I'd like to summarize that as having started in the impact space, 15, 17 years ago, each of us individually, we have been part of this whole sort of evolution of what really just started with just microfinance and innovation around financial services, to that broadening to areas where there are gaps in the market, gaps in basic services, and then about 5, 7, maybe 10 years ago, clean energy came into focus and the effects of climate change became apparent. The same vulnerable communities that we had started off working with through financial services, their vulnerability to this issue became in focus. And as the ecosystem grew, it just made so much sense that there was sort of a symbiotic sort of relationship between the inclusion space and climate space. And as a group, we've done a lot of transactions in this space and individually as well. And I think the one common factor between where we started and where climate is today is the ecosystem effect. And I think the sectors that we don't focus on so much is probably because, at least from our standpoint, that same ecosystem effect doesn't really exist. And for a space and an idea and entrepreneurs to really grow robustly, at least in our experience, that has been a huge factor. And so if I take the impact side out of it and just put the commercial returns aspect and the commercial viability aspect of it, I think that's been one reason for us to double down.
So my background and how we came into doing climate, before that a little bit about what we do at Lok Capital. So we are currently on our 4th impact vintage, and we are investing into 4 sectors primarily: financial services, agriculture, health, and climate change. And the way we have looked at impact has always been tapered around impact plus commercial returns that is commensurate with commercial rate-seeking investors, not just discount or impact-seeking investors. but impact should go hand in hand with commercial returns has always been at the forefront of our thesis. And now I think we are at an opportune moment in the ecosystem where that is becoming uniquely possible, especially when it comes to climate. I come from a little bit of a operator background, a non-traditional background into climate investing. I used to be in solar energy and mobility before leading climate investments for Lok.
I represent NEEV funds. NEEV means foundation in Hindi, and the foundation of NEEV was laid back in 2015 by the two PMs, PM of UK, Mr. David Cameron and Mr. Modi, to set up NEEV fund and invest into 8 low-income states of the country, focusing primarily on climate, environment, and social infrastructures as sectors. What we did over the years, and we take pride in that, is we laid foundation not just for companies, but also many sectors. We've literally been the first institutional investor in many sectors, whether it is agri-silo as a business or biomass as a business. And then all these are becoming the buzzwords today. We made investments about 7 years, 8 years back when it was not even spoken about. So continuing that journey, we set up NEEV 2. Here again, we recently made our first water tech investment. It's a sector which is very close to us. Like you asked, what's been our background? So I've been into infrastructure, and very few people would have really worked in water as a sector. All of us know it's a real world challenge, but how many commercially viable businesses are there where you could deploy sizable capital? Very far and few. It's been our endeavor to support more and more companies like that, and we'll speak more about the portfolio as we go.
Yeah, thank you. We have been, as a firm, investing in the space for over 15 years, with our first investment actually in a water company called Viatech Waba. When we invested, it wasn't even listed. And today it counts itself as the 4th largest water company in the private sector globally. Since then, we have invested in renewables and mobility and other spaces. I think the one or the two comments I would make is that after 27 years of having investment experience now, our focus is primarily on climate and sustainability, which is a broader theme, includes sort of economic viability as well. And I think we are seeing the space having evolved since 2018, which is since then we have been investing only in sustainability-focused investments, and we have 19 investments in the space as a firm. We are now in the fund space where effectively we are now investing also as a fund. But what I would say is that the maturity in terms of understanding of the space, I would say still is developing. I think there would be a lot of people who equate climate to mobility. And I think mobility is a very, very small space with respect to sort of what is the broader issues of climate. And I think we need more deeper thinking in terms of what are life cycle emissions, what are the other sectors. And that, I think what I would characterize it by saying is that, look, having invested across many verticals, I would say climate is one of the most complex verticals where you need to look at interrelationships. You can't think of it in silos. It requires deeper thinking, deeper assessment, and we are prepared for it. We are in the game, and we continue to see this as an opportunity for making a change in climate, as well as making economic returns for the next decades, actually.
Thank you. Well, I think there is so much to be, and all folks with wisdom have spoken their respective experiences, but both for Guneet and I, as our paths crossed, he coming from a business family, billionaire family, who's the 3rd largest shipping guys in the world, and I, having led as a professional accountant multiple multinationals into the country, worked across 6-7 sectors. I think our, as they say, the paths was to cross to see that what Parinama is ultimately the end state, what we are creating, what is the Parinam, what is the end result. And that, I think, formulated the Parinama Ventures. Not that, whatever we are doing, everything will have a end goal, but ultimately that's what is the objective. The theme or the thought process is that we leave the world a better place than what we inherited. I think that's one part. And also, I think both of us firmly believe that the purpose of life is to live it for something that shall outlast it. Given these perspective coming in from an entrepreneur business family, and he being the second generation, I as a professional, worked across different sectors, having impacted and also made success of all these ventures in India. I think one piece which I recall Peter spoke in the morning is the fact that we all will live with a purpose. We made money, we've done everything. But something which our kids, our society circles relate with, that are these folks making something as a difference, Are these value adding? Money everybody makes, whatever is written in your destiny you will make this way or that way. But are you enabling, others around you? Are you, doing the better sense of purpose as per our, Indian ethos, culture? I say this is, see, India about 1100 years back used to control 1/3 of the world GDP. By all whosoever has checked it out and all that, it will control the 7 seas. Obviously, multiple years of Mughal invasion, plundering, 300 years of colonial rule has depleted India of multiple, $1 trillion of, wealth. But to build it back, I think this is one place which is definitely going to be making a big difference, And it's just not the every aspect of the climate. And why I say, because multiple family offices across the world are keen to look at that, what way we can be with the part of this Karam Bhumi of the world, where a lot of, opportunities are going to come up. What is going to be the blue ocean economy, which is again a big place. So one is the adaptability and there is the sustainability, and or the resilience. And I think all these are coming together in the space. And why I say India in the last maybe few years or so, or about at some statistics say that maybe 100 billion came into the country from the overseas investment, because India is always a capital hungry country. Just about 1/5 of that went into the maybe equity space in some sense. And you look at, we need trillions of dollars. So where will that money find its flow back? It is all across multiple spectrums, multiple areas. And maybe a lot of the seed money, Government of India is also doing phenomenal work in terms of building up the ecosystem of the startups. There is also that big ticket which comes in hundreds of millions of dollars. But then there is the mid segment, and which is what, as a catalyst, we want to be at the forefront, to be enabling all that, all the family offices money to be coming into the country, all the PE, VCs guys to be channelizing to the right things, making the right governance norms, enabling the right policies pieces, ensuring the right mechanism of all these becoming success. Because ultimately it's the world resources which goes down if any enterprise goes down, And I think building up the aspect of not just the typical academic pieces to create ventures, but then how do you do the skilling pieces? How do you impact the common man on the ground? How do you ensure that everybody, who's a part of our humanity makes a difference? Obviously, we have the radical strife in the world, which is one aspect. But then, apart from this, how do you bring the world together? And all this will be, people talk about it in some sense that we've created. We have lived it for maybe, 5,000, 10,000 years, which is what our culture is about. So shaping it up, giving it back, and paying it forward. I think all these are pieces which we believe in, and that's where Parinama Ventures, as it is, going to play its role play. We are taking the baby steps, but I think it will be a collaborative effort. Everybody in the audience, everybody on the stage, everybody outside. I think we all going to take everybody along. That's what our belief is. Money we will make, I don't think that's a piece, but how we will make it impactfully, sustainably, and take everybody grow. And I think that's what is the belief, is what this is all about.
Yeah. Thank you, Raj. It's interesting to see how we all had working in different sectors and how it all converged to climate. And Samir, building on what you said around the need to think interdisciplinarily and establishing those and thinking deeply about those connections, while the space is still nascent, we think of climate as a vertical, and we talk about subsectors like energy, mobility, biotech. At Avana, we try to draw a parallel between digitization and climate, believing that given how digitization used to cut across sectors, where every organization, every corporate, every company, every sector had to digitize itself, similarly, how sustainability will be so key in the coming years, that every space will need to figure out sustainability and decreasing carbon emissions. And do you think that leads us to that we should start thinking of climate not as a vertical, but actually start thinking more broadly about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, climate should not be thought about as a vertical, but more of a horizontal. Because if you look at investments that impact climate, they actually are across the spectrum. And just to speak about examples, I mean, we have a company which is an NBFC, but that is in 1,400 villages in India doing rooftop solar. So I think you have what is replacement of solar with diesel, you have enabling income enhancement in rural India, and you have a financial company. We have a data analytics company, which is one of the top tier companies globally, effectively working with clients such as Microsoft in terms of how do you do actual impact assessment. So they have built basically models which incorporate 40,000 algorithms in terms of how do you quickly create a distinction between how do you measure impact. We are working with a company which effectively is doing deep work in water, doing electrocoagulation to say, look, how do you do wastewater recycling? That's a deep energy company. We are working with a number of companies which are focused on difficult problems, and we see what we do as more deep tech and trying to see how do we stay away from platform plays, because there are enough people doing that, and say, look, how do you go deeper and find solutions that are encompassing. And what I mean by interdisciplinary is what you do in energy affects water. What you do in water affects agriculture. What you do sort of in overall, what happens to, someone was mentioning air quality, what happens to the air quality and temperature depends how your crops will be. So I think one thing I would also say is that the thinking also needs to evolve. So in addition to what you said, Vatsal, about the broader thinking, I think we always say, oh, the government isn't doing something. I mean, it's the government, private sector, and us as behavior change. I think all three have to contribute towards what you referred to as a better world. But I think that we believe that this will grow over time, and people will understand that actions have implications for other sectors as well. Which is why I think the thinking towards only net zero in energy is perhaps a very limiting factor. I think people and investors as well as LPs and GPs need to broaden the range in terms of how they think about a complex sector which is new and where many of the answers are there, but many are evolving. And how do you support technologies? And you have to understand something deeply to then make a decision as to what will this look like in 3 years from now? What will this look like in 6 years from now? And how many people can it impact? I think it has to, at the end of the day, make a change or move the needle on climate. Anything that doesn't scale, is not affordable, is not accessible, is one of those things which even as a firm and as a government, we should not be supporting. I think right now is the need to say, look, how do we look at solutions? Some which have evolved, some which are evolving, and look at problem statements deeper than mobility. I mean, the mobility plus climate cannot be 80% overlap. I think mobility is an important subsector, but it can't be dominating subsector. Talk about intermittency, talk about grid stability, talk about topsoil, talk about regen agriculture, I could go on, but I think the breadth is necessary, and all of this is interrelated, which is, I think, one of the things we discussed before the panel as well, that you can't think of it in silos. I think the interconnectivity should be obvious and will be obvious over time.
Thank you, Samir. So I have a next question for both Sukain and Vikram, and building on what Samir said now. Mobility has been the dominant, most of our capital have gone to mobility, and there is no doubt that we need to expand and we need to expand to other areas. But while we do that, what are the key takeaways we can take from the mobility space and the funding which has gone into mobility space and how the markets have evolved, which can then be applied to other sectors?
Ajay, let's, why just mobility? Let's look at how climate as a space has evolved, right? We started with renewable energy to start with, right? We had the feed-in tariffs. People did it for depreciation purposes. People did it for, the high returns. But eventually, it was a mandate from the government to scale those businesses. Like, I think the point that Samir made is very, very relevant. How do you make each of these businesses or solutions scalable and affordable? To that, and just marrying that with your question, does it need to become part of our everyday life, or it's, actually, in the few months back, ISC had a Singapore session. I actually made a presentation there. We are all geared out by the 5 elements, and human life has actually evolved with that. Now you take fire, you equate that with energy, water, earth, air. You need solutions across each of these elements. We've spoiled enough of it for all these years. So coming back to the learnings now, there are enough and more. I think the more you scale, the more you innovate, it will happen eventually. Now, are there enough new businesses coming up in each of these spaces? We are seeing that. Mobility obviously is easier. You've seen large scale innovation happening. You've seen successes globally, and therefore people are doing that. Maybe what we are seeing now, and one thing which over the past few years we've seen is a lot of these businesses have become mainstream businesses and have become really scalable. I was actually speaking to one of the persons here a while back. Businesses have scaled 10 times in terms of revenue in climate tech, which we did not imagine. Right? It's gone beyond our exit cases also. And why is this happening? Because there is a mandate. Corporates are being more responsible. Governments are putting those mandates. And therefore, we are seeing those, whether it's biofuels as a space, we see pollution control as a space. So each of these cases are picking up, and I think it's going to be driven by mandate a lot. And eventually, returns will drive the sector.
So just to take a page from what Suken said, and more pointedly to the question on what we can take away from mobility. See, essentially, Samir also said there is a reason that most of the capital is going towards mobility, and 80% cannot be mobility as a subset, right? But if 80% is coming from a subset, there is a reason. And I think from what we have seen essentially and understood about the sector is, there are 2 key driving factors why that's happening. Of course, governmental support is certainly table stakes. That has to be there for every sector, and that's been there for mobility through FAME 1, FAME 2, and possibly more FAMEs, let's see. But essentially, scale, governmental support, and commercial viability, right? So these 3 factors have driven mobility as a segment so much that it's now becoming attractive with very low barriers to entry for somebody to start a mobility venture. There are technological barriers, there are financing barriers that are yet to be overcome. But the key takeaway, at least from studying that sector, would be 1, yes, you need governmental support, but what you also need a definitive path to scale and profitability. So if those 2 things occur naturally, and if there is a way to bring down your barrier to entry into that sector, then we will see other sectors too becoming as diverse and as proliferant as mobility has become. Right? So at least that would be my takeaway from it.
If I can just add one point, eventually you will need one Flipkart kind of an event in this business also. You'll need one precision agriculture company to become a unicorn. You will need one water tech company to become a unicorn, and you will see things following up.
Great. So it's a good segue into the next question I have for Mona. I think, given we need to expand beyond sectors, and so what according to you are the sectors or areas which you think are ripe for disruption from a timing perspective and market readiness perspective, government support perspective, but you don't find enough founders building for it, and you would wish more founders were building for that?
So we focus on 4 sectors, sub-sectors within climate. I mean, it's just a choice based on what we think we can do well, where we see good activity, etc. And I'll answer you in that context. So one is climate financing, the kind of example that Samir gave would fit under that. It had rooftop solar, EVs, etc. The second is climate smart agriculture. The third is circular economy, and the fourth is green technologies, where your EVs, your energy efficiency plays, alternate materials, etc., can all fall. So this is how we have mapped out at least our work. I mean, there is more stuff beyond. We've done a fair bit of work trying to understand the landscape, met companies, understood their journeys and all that. Where I'm personally, and to Rajiv's point as to what are you here for beyond the work of your fund, etc. Where is it that your personal sort of motivation also lies? I would say circular economy for a country like India, but unfortunately, I think it's still got some ways to go before it can absorb the kind of capital and the kind of interest that it can potentially generate. I think it's a matter of time. There are some good examples out there, but of the 4 sectors that I just mapped out, I just listed down, this probably needs most work. I just want to add another point on the earlier question. I think one success factor, and Vikram and I have been working on a potential deal together, and it's one learning that we've had is apart from the success factors listed, the confluence of technology. It's fascinating for me to see how along the entire value chain of mobility, the ability, the alacrity with which different companies and business models are using tech and data as intelligence, to just do it better. So 2 years back versus now, I think the mobility space is very different because of the way tech is potentially used and already, and each company, whether you're a financier, whether you are a OEM, whether you're a battery swapping, whether you're somewhere in the value chain, the tech prowess and the tech sort of depth within companies is something else. So that I think is the driver here.
If I may add one example which actually links the renewable energy discussion to what Mona was saying about circular economy. So we just signed an MOU with IIT Mandi to develop sort of recycling of solar panels, to say, look, how do you recycle solar panels? There will be 10 billion panels in the world. So I think the one thought is that you have to think of problems before they become problems. Secondly, I think this involves technology because you have to have drones as well as software to assess micro cracks. Then you have to find an easy way to disassemble. Then you have to find ways for the aluminum, etc., to go in existing value chains. And then you have to deal with high tech to say, what do you do with the cells? So I think this also elaborates on the point where, climate is not a vertical. It impacts circular economy, it impacts renewable energy. And I think this is an example where, effectively complexity can work to your advantage, where you said, look, I don't need to solve all problems. I just need to enable the problems to be solved. And the last point I would make is that, look, some of this, if you start thinking in terms of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, or think about life cycle assessments, decisions on investments may become a lot more clearer from the angle of climate, rather than only looking at tailpipe emissions versus, full cycle emissions.
Rajiv, if you would like to add on sectors which you want to more focus on, or you wish founders were building for?
See, I would be, maybe as they say, somebody has to be radically different, and I've always at times played contrarian in some sense. But I think all these are very valuable pieces and all veterans sitting here who have been doing this. So obviously I respect and, regard it. But I would say that 2 pieces what we would also look at as, creating the ecosystem is, which are both core, for mankind in all due respect. One, which I would say is the education, and India has always believed that, Guru Gobind do khade kaake lagu paye, balihari Guru aapke jo Gobind diyo bataye, if the education is not there, all these technologies, and we know that it will go run aground, in spite of the best of. So we need to build it from a grassroots level, and the digital piece is the reaching in nook and corner of the country, ensuring that every child who is coming up, is aware of the right pieces. And mind you, it's not that we, having been educated in the English space, etc., say that we know everything. I'm sorry. The people in the villages who may not be, they've learned from scriptures, they learned from our Vedas, they've learned from our ethos, they learned from our value systems. A lot of things need to be going back. And I have always believed in reverse mentoring, because a lot of these things also as a part of education needs to be, because they understand the climate more, they understand it day in, day out, and they are the people who, are living it. And mind you, the Coke, Pepsis, the pizzas going into the villages are spoiling their health, This is something they built they were much stronger, sturdier, healthier, and that's where I think the entire other piece is also that we are going to seriously look at that as you built up the education system, leveraging on whatever the way to reach is that to build up the things back and ensure that back to the basics is a part of our pieces so that the technologies, etc., all these pieces, etc., they go down the line can be easily implemented. If we don't enable them, then what is this all about? We can't sit on glass houses or sitting in cities, etc., expect that the country will transform, the trillions of dollars will be made. I'm sorry, it will not be. So that's just one perspective. The second piece is also important because having been a part of the healthcare, 1/3 of my corporate career has been setting up maybe Max Healthcare, and then with bringing Boston Scientific, being part of Nat Health, governing council. So I think a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. Irrespective of anything, I may have billions of dollars in my account, but if I'm not, keeping fit and fine, it's all, rubbish, which will paper somebody next generation will enjoy. I'll leave the world without that. So I think that's another piece. And mind you, again, those are also part of the entire climate change. Everything is impacting every common man on the ground. We sit in cities, etc. If we talk about air, we talk about water, we talk about all that impacting our health. If our minds, our physical pieces not. So I think these two pieces are adding on to the perspective is all a part of our ecosystem, which I'm going to very seriously look at and see that where the dollars need to be going in.
Yes, Rajiv. Samir, in the last night's roundtable, we were talking about Indra Water going global. We have a company in our portfolio which is doing climate controlled agriculture in Rajasthan, which is now planning to go to Middle East. So we're seeing a lot of these companies now going global. So how do you see the potential of building from India for at least the global south, if not the complete world?
Yeah, I would begin with a statement that, look, climate change is upon us, and it's an urgent and immediate problem. I think technologies that are sort of best in class have to be the ones that should be supported. Our thesis is that, look, if that is a starting point, then of course you want to look at a company in India that solves a problem or addresses it in a meaningful manner. And that's how Indra Water comes up, where we say, look, we have an IIT Mumbai company supplying to Unilever in Mexico and Unilever in Egypt. I mean, that's like growing in India for the world. Having said that, I think the other thought would also be that if there was a technology, hypothetically, that was overseas, and we could bring it to India to address India's issues at Indian price points, and they were willing to do so, we would not shy away from the investment. Because I think it's too late right now to reinvent the wheel. If something is available and it can be adapted to Indian sort of scenario and at a price point that it can reach, as was being talked about at the bottom of the pyramid, that's something that should be promoted. Because we have I wouldn't say we have run out of time, but time is of the essence in terms of addressing issues, actually. So I think we are seeing both ways. We are seeing Indra Water is one, but there are a few other technologies developing in India, which we could talk about once investments are made. But they would change the way people are thinking that India, I think there was a comment made yesterday that is India the center where innovation happens. I would say yes, and yes, actually. But I think climate is a new space and people have to understand the complexities and work with them, and it can evolve over a period of time.
Thanks. Move to Sukain, I think building on this question and following up on that, I think, so have we started underwriting global market potential in our underwriting cases yet, or still some time to there?
We actually don't underwrite that, to be very frank. But is there potential? I completely echo what Samir is saying. And in fact, again, going back to the IIC event in Singapore, in April, we actually had, and thanks to IIC for organizing that, there were a few corporate folks who had joined in those discussions. People coming from Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Singapore. They're not looking for solutions from China, not from US. They're looking for solutions from India because they know whatever solutions India will develop will be frugal, which will be affordable by their population also. So in fact, there is a really good scope for us to export our technologies globally.
Got it. So I have a broader question for the panel, I think. do incremental improvements excite you, or will you wait for the next novel breakthrough? And I'll give you an example. For example, there's a company which is trying to reduce PET in plastic bottles by, let's say, 30-40% using agri-waste, and recyclability doesn't get hampered. Versus you wait for a company which brings up a novel material. How will you think about it, and will that excite you or not?
So I think I would say that's a false dichotomy, because why not both, right? Because essentially, I mean, not wearing the investor's lens and just looking at it from what is necessary to make these changes happen from a climate impact perspective. I think any incumbent would have to look at an option that either accentuates the existing business to be climate resilient and adaptive, but also invest into future-proof technology so that their core business itself is not threatened, right? So I'm sure if you take any packaging manufacturer across the world, he must be having nightmares about if there is another player coming up with a plastic-free alternative. So in a sense, I have seen companies which have done both, and I've also seen companies which are doing one or the other. There is no right answer here, but I think it comes down to what kind of risk versus returns are you seeking in either or both of these opportunities. In some cases, the risk-reward profile might be very distinct when you're investing in a novel technology. Not to say that's any reason to stay away from the technology. There is every reason to do that separately, as Samir clearly articulated in the deep tech potential of what India has to offer, right? But the incumbents also have to wake up to the reality that either Indian innovations or global innovations are coming for their lunch. And they have to make their businesses future-proof from that perspective, investing into the future.
If I may add, since you asked about plastics, so I think there, first of all, there's no right answer to it. But we have looked at, the way we would think is looked at all what is available. And PLA, PHA, yes, they could be done, but they have a climate footprint as well. And B, the cost is very high. So adoption will not happen. So we invested actually in a company that does a master batch, which if it's put in plastics, it behaves as a plastic for 12 to 24 months. And after that, it biodegrades without leaving any trace. So this technology happens to be overseas. But think of it as the milk packet that Mother Dairy sends to your home. It can never be recycled because the cost of recycling that small piece, the cost of collection, reprocessing is less than the virgin cost. So nobody will recycle it. So if somebody told you that, look, you can just put it in the ambient temperature and it biodegrades in 200 days without leaving a trace, that addresses circularity, so what I'm saying is those kind of solutions have to be thought of, and adoption should be unrelated to sort of, where it originates.
Maybe I'll just add my 2 cents worth of, and I think very well articulated. The piece is that, we can't do everything, and obviously some of these areas we would need to live with for some time till the time there is better solution comes in. But believe you me, and why I say this is important, that and maybe I'll give you one example of a restaurant in Delhi, where there was a challenge of the water flow available. So what they did, and what is amazing is that they didn't get the disposable, which is made of, plastics, other stuff, etc., which is what I salute them, that they made the disposable, whether it is the plates, the spoons, the, bowls and everything of, maybe we also use, in South India, a lot of us in all the top families, they put the food on the banana leaf, and they eat it, whatever may be the level, because there is so much which goes in terms of, the same way they are using that. So they could have used the other stuff, but I think that's where. So every small bit will make a difference, and each one of us, wherever we see, whatever we can, I think will go a long way. There is no absolutely right or wrong answers, but I think looking at that, what is biodegradable, what is sustainable, what is something which is right for human beings, because if I can go to a upfield restaurant and I can pay for a dish, at the $200, I might as well pay for $20 for that plate, which is a fair thing, so, but not everybody. I think every bit would count. So let's build that momentum. If we would popularize such places, we would, write off about such places, we would talk about it. I think that's where we will make everybody come around. And I think that's the way the life should be going ahead. Yeah.
So a lot of technologies which will solve for climate change does not exist today, and do not exist today, and a lot of them will be deep technologies, and which have a higher gestation period, which take longer. And there has been a lot of conversations today and yesterday about blended finance and how catalytic finance can help. So what would be your advice to founders building in the deep tech / climate intersection on how should they think about capitalizing their companies and how to leverage all of this?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the nature. If it's a project oriented kind of business, so, let's take a GPS renewables kind of a company. This is also related to the point I made earlier on about ecosystem. So if there are different types of, and specific to the financing question, if there are different types of financing players available, if there's very large quantum of financing required because it's, utility scale or large scale kind of projects, obviously the small impact focused NBFC kind of lending doesn't cut ice. So you do need the big incumbents to play there, but they have challenges of risk which they can't underwrite, or risk mitigation structures need to exist. And so if whether it's foundations or even government guarantee kind of available, that's the kind of ecosystem that it requires for things to move forward. So absolutely, I mean, I think if you look back at any impact sector that has grown, at least in my experience, this kind of, at least from the capital side, ecosystem players, whether it is the capital providers or guarantee providers, risk mitigation, or even further deepening of such assets to be then further, PTC'd or securitized or whatever, so there's a whole chain of events that can follow, and absolutely essential for deepening of capital availability and then growth of such sectors.
I have a very specific point to add there, since you said that a lot of technologies do not exist. I was recently reading a Columbia paper on climate change that said that 90% of decarbonization can happen with technologies that exist. So what doesn't exist? There are two things that don't exist to make specifically what you asked to happen. One is a confluence of technologies, right? So, for example, in the US, they do beehive farming with a combination of robotics and AI. That is not a technology that can decarbonize the whole world, given its cost structure constraints. And there are carbon capture opportunities that are, Occidental Petroleum invested about $1 billion in carbon capture in the US. But is that viable at this point of time economically for India? It's a different question, right? So essentially, it's not that the technologies don't exist. If you indiscriminately apply those technologies, regardless of the cost, you will solve decarbonization to a large extent. But the question is, where do I judiciously apply a confluence of these technologies, in which geography, with what cost structure, while making it advantageous for the LPs also in question, and the objectives of climate change in question. So that's the real challenge that we are all trying to solve here. Yeah.
Maybe I'd just like to add a piece that, see, everybody starts small, I think these are all the initial days. I think it's important, not just the folks who have come together for this conference. I think it is paramount important that if something is good, it is taking time to evolve. I think it's a collective piece, which is where I was telling somebody that every place we don't look at that way we're going to make money or something like that. I think let's enable the go-to-market pieces, Some of these technologies are innovative, they are distinctive, they are disruptive. As long as we know or we read through collectively that these are making a difference, they may not be working in, for example, if they're not working in India is like, as I was discussing somebody like Europe, it's not working in Tamil Nadu, let's see if I can make it work in Punjab. Let's see if I can make it work in Northeast. Let's see I can, so some of that pieces, etc., that's one, and keep evolving. The other piece is that all the good dollars what have gone in, because if there is a good ideation, it's got collective wisdom, it's got that initial pieces to scale and grow. I think it is also important as a part of the society ecosystem to help scale it beyond. Get bigger dollars in so that if there is something which is an upgrade, get it at the right value, and then, enabling I think go-to-market pieces is where I see that each one of us collectively has a role play. And it's so important to find the right markets. As I sit as the executive trustee of the CFO board, I just knock the doors, top 50 CX of the country or 100 CX of the country. It doesn't take time, and I can push this to say that, guys, take a look. So, for example, the first, a water purifier which doesn't use electricity coming in WHO certified. I said, RO, with all due respect, if anybody from RO company here, don't get me wrong, but it depletes the minerals which is getting into human body. I've told that this is something which uses the ecosystem, doesn't waste the material. Man, just use it. I've already given to, a person who's leading 7,500 organizations in terms of as an administrative heads. I said, you guys, it's of your importance. The guy would have struggled take 10 years to open the doors. I said, it's now important for you. Use in every household. Save every Indian, not getting the right minerals in the body. Water is so basic. So easy to do it. But the point is, I think technology is great. Designed in Switzerland, cleared in USA, made in South Korea, coming to India. It's a global piece. Let's share. Let's build it. So I think that is the way I look at every piece. So that's where the big dollar is going to go in, and I am fully supportive of that.
All right. So before we open the floor to audience for questions, my last question to everybody on the panel largely is that, how do you see the next 10 years? How many large companies do you see will be made in this? How many large companies do you see in the next 10 years in the climate context? And if you can share names, or if your companies you're excited about in your portfolio or otherwise. So what does your crystal ball say essentially?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would see many companies being successful in this space. I think the space is just evolving, and you will see winners, or you'll see companies come in doing both, becoming large companies as well as making an impact. An example on cricket, which I always use here, is that it's not the unicorns, it's what is the average. I think the person who wins is who has the highest score on the board. I'm not fighting for the audience to do the 4s and 6s. As long as I get the highest score, I'm a winner. So I think supporting technologies without looking at the unicorns, but saying, what is the risk-adjusted return that I will get here? Because, even if I look at all the companies in our portfolio, the risk-adjusted returns are different. So I can't say that this one is the best, because it may be giving me the highest returns, but the risk also was the highest. So I'm attuned to thinking in terms of risk-adjusted returns. So, it's hard to think of returns without understanding what is the corresponding risk involved. But having said that, I think the new sectors, I would think energy will have the largest number. I think biofuels, we're looking at, I think the thinking will have to move from purely, I guess adaptation will also have to come in. Mitigation is not going to be enough. There's going to be a realization we have to think of adaptation. Heating or cooling solutions for a heating world is also crucial. I think grid storage, there are a lot of areas of interest. I think I could go on, but it's very hard to know which specific company. But I think the space is tremendously exciting, and I see, broadly speaking, a lot going on in the space.
I think rather than getting into company specific, I think each sector within climate is doing well. Would you see businesses scaling up? I would rather, instead of getting into returns or anything, will you see green hydrogen businesses scaling up, becoming mainstream businesses, where, public money can come in? Yes.
Let me rephrase the question a bit to everybody. I think, what are the top 2 subsectors you're most excited about for the next 10 years?
Maybe I would like to take it a little differently, to say that it's not just the top 2 sectors. If I have a queue lining up after this, that is the dollars that you want to, put in, then we will share some of those pieces. But I would say that there are multiple sectors, with all due respect. As long as the folks are very keen, we are willing to. And obviously, as they say, we are not punters. We are serious, committed, investors. There'll be multiple opportunity. We would be loving to share collectively as people, so that, and wherever we see big bucks going in, and I'm sure, with all due respect, the Western world is going to line up. India has going to be scores and scores of unicorns. This is just a small step, but I think there will be multiple. I would like to create a Blackstone, Vanguard, a BlackRock in India, and I would like to, those people to be the self-funders for India versus looking at Western capital, and get all those wealth back. And there'll be multiple opportunities, is all I could say. If somebody wants to divulge some secrets, absolutely. But for that, we will have to, find how much dollars you have in your back pocket, and then I think we can find the right suitors.
Mona, Vikram, what thematic areas are you most excited about for the next 10 years?
I guess energy, the energy space and the e-mobility space, because the e-mobility has got onto a decent start. And to your earlier point about incremental versus quantum leaps, frankly, every sector, and e-mobility is an example of that. Really what's taken off are the e-rickshaws in any real numbers. So you can call it like an incremental change that is starting from there to all the way to the larger form factors. But I think everything else is conspiring to make that a success. I have hopes of, right now we're not moving the needle on climate change related impact through e-mobility, but I have hopes of that happening. And anything related with sort of energy transition is definitely on the cards. And I'm hoping that, examples like GPS renewables and others in the circular economy space, including plastics, is what the country desperately needs. So I'm really more hopeful than certain that that would happen.
Yeah, I think a large, with Mona said, essentially energy and mobility are scaled up sectors, right? So you might not see them in venture investments, but you already have multi-billion-dollar public companies in green infrastructure. And you also have recent winners in electric mobility, OEM manufacturing plays as well. So they are largely, to a certain extent, late-stage opportunities and in the rearview mirror. But to more specifically answer your question, I think we are very excited about how grid inefficiencies are going to be tackled by storage. Because as energy penetrates, mobility penetrates, lots of appliances get electrified more and more. I think grid inefficiency and therefore storage as a service is going to be extremely important at the grid scale. So we are trying to look at that sector, and I'm fairly confident that we will see big winners there. The other sector, which is 20% of India's GDP, is agriculture. So what's going to be cost effective and contribute to climate resilience and adaptation that can start in India, play out globally, but India in itself can become a very large market. So yeah, those two I would say, if I can put my rep on the line.
Maybe I will just add on, three sectors which I personally feel are going to be as critical is water. Mona touched upon the waste, piece which is there. And the third thing is, and I think you touched upon the right pieces, India can be the food bowl of the world. These are agri, in a different way, nutritional agriculture, which is there. So water, waste, agri, in addition to, energy mobility, I think would be one of the three pieces India can make that bigger impact. We have perennial rivers, but they need to be, revived, maintained, built back, because water is life, otherwise with no water, there's no life. So I think these three pieces, which I just like to add on to what they say, yeah.
So can you add something? Yeah.
The points got covered. So basically, I was also talking about water. So what will do well, like, she mentioned mobility, energy, they definitely will do well, right? What should do well, being part of the industry where I think not much attention has gone, is clearly within agriculture growing, right? There are enough and more marketplaces, but how many are growing, right? That's one. Second, what are we doing about water, right? Are we really solving the real world challenges? These two, I would, as a climate sector investor, would believe if we solve these two, rest will get solved. They will.
Fair point. Now we'll open the floor to questions. Yeah.
you can speak up.
Good afternoon. Fantastic points by all the panelists. I would want to know what are your thoughts of investing in nature-based solutions, or as they say, natural capital. There are enough instances, but to cite examples of some of the cities in the US, they protected their forest and that helped save millions and billions of dollars, which would otherwise have been used in water purification plants. So what are your thoughts of investing in nature-based solutions?
No, I think what you said is an important point. I think we were covering the questions that sort of, we can cover in a short period of time. But nature-based solutions are also critical and absolutely critical. I think waste to value or, it also covers circular economy. Or how do you deal with sort of, saying that, look, how do you use every piece of sort of, the value chain? I think one of the investments we are doing is in a company which is doing hemp, which says, look, every piece of the plant can be utilized either for bio-oil, for fabrics, for replacement of cotton, etc. But I think it's a longer discussion, but clearly nature-based solutions are obviously going to be a key part, but that doesn't negate the fact that what was discussed here is also equally important.
Here, this is a subject of more personal interest than anything that I'm doing professionally here. At least what I have studied on this is that you do need much sort of softer capital sort of format, philanthropic / soft money in order to, the kind of things that you're talking about really requires very long periods of time, first of all, and really no expectation of a commercial return. And really focusing on things like rewilding, reforestation, and sort of that nature of solutions for which I think at least the commercial capital doesn't have answers for.
In fact, we looked at a company like she's talking about. We don't think it's in the near term investable. Okay, it's at best philanthropic activity, probably that can attract that kind of capital. That said, when we say nature-based solution, I don't know how you want to classify it, but growing plants to generate energy, again, what's the best use of that land is a question that we need to answer ourselves. So, can you use bamboo to generate sustainable aviation fuel? Yes. But could that land be put to better use for food security? Those are the kind of questions you sort of, dilemma you are in some ways.
Go ahead. Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Banerjee. I have been involved with impact investment more than 25 years. I may be completely the wrong person to ask this question because I'm just here for 1.5 days. What my point would be that you are talking very much about incremental changes. And me coming here for 1.5 days, for me, I think India needs systemic change. I'm sitting here freezing because the airco is on. In Delhi, nearly every second house has an airco. When I was a kid in Allahabad, everybody took a cycle. Today, if you go by cycle, you will be dead. People will hit. There's so much massive, the whole lifestyle. And what you mentioned, Rajiv, about going back to the ancient, I really agree to that. But am I seeing that in India? No. Your water level, the groundwater, when I was a kid in Lucknow, it was 30 meters below. Today, it's more than 1,200 meters. So you're talking about agriculture, incremental investments, and this and that. I don't think you're going to get anywhere with it. I mean, it's in Netherlands, we have a saying that you're trying to wipe the floor dry while the tap is on. Isn't it time that you should start thinking about how to switch off the tap? And this, I mean, is by a systemic change. And I would like to hear from you guys that you're investing. Why not invest in a systemic change?
No, absolutely bang on, and I love it. Thank you so very much for highlighting it. And believe you me, there is another avatar of mine, which is beyond Parinama, that trying to work in terms of the Namami Gange Foundation, and which is where to revive the river basins, which you rightly said. And I think that's another piece which one of my colleagues there is being an active part of it. And believe you me, we've already piloted one technology in coming in from Japan, indigenized for India, soil-less farming, and soil-less farming, we've spoiled the soil across the world, with so much of our fertilizers pumped in, but for maybe certain parts of the Western world where they believe in organic stuff and all that, which is okay. But everybody needs to. So I think those are the pieces which we have test piloted. We are trying to work out. We can take maybe few hundreds of acres, especially a lot of land banks across the country, which is in some ways barren also, but it needs just the right energy, and we are also trying to work out. It needs the ecosystem to be created, which is, we've discussed it with Shaji of NABARD. We said that you could create the green bonds overseas, which 60% of that entire piece is made of, iron steel to create those greenhouses. And maybe if you're coming from Netherlands, you would know it better. Rabobank is very keen. I think one of my good dear friends who's representing them here, we were discussing that if you can create those ecosystems, soilless farming, nutrition, every cherry tomatoes, every strawberry coming out, it is perfect in nutrition, all the organic ones, people will love it. We just need to look at the economies of scale, bring in the prices, giving farmers, alternative ways to come together, build those, and we are evolving this. So I think, but point well made, and that's where back to basics. Through some of these routes are initiatives. So new adaptable technology, which is more resilient, disease-free, multiple pluses. I can, talk till the cows come home, but that's not the objective. I think these are all small baby steps, and there are others which we would love to explore. Any other ideas you have, we can looking at multiple. And absolutely, I would love to get all the kids on bicycles, but maybe not with the roads what we have currently across multiple cities. But I think it's a point well made. And we all owe it to pay it forward, whatever way we can do it. I think it's a collective piece which is there. India of tomorrow is all going to everybody coming together. And we would love to have your, more engagement across multiple sectors. So, but thank you so much.
Yeah, hi. I have a response for you. I respect your opinion, but I think there are multiple aspects to addressing climate change. And what we are addressing as investors, and it's not incremental change, it is change at the fundamental level. When you replace 30% or more of India's energy on fossil fuels with solar, it's not incremental. People, on the West, you would say that, look, replace all your solar, but that doesn't, everything with solar, it doesn't work that way. It is a transition, which is why I think it is gradual. The objective is to address problems which are within the ambit of what you are operating in. And we all have personal lives where we do many different things. This is not the forum, but I could talk about what we do in philanthropy and all that, but that is a different aspect of it. So I think investors have to come to, the government policies have to be accommodative as well. And I think as a comment made on FAME, I think that enabled mobility to happen in an accelerated fashion. But, when you talk about the fact that people are talking about cycles, imitation or, perhaps an enhancement in lifestyle is an aspiration every Indian has. You can't take away from that as well. So I think in the interest of time, I'll stop, but there are multiple answers. I think your problem, the problem you stated about the difference is true, but that doesn't mean that, we are going to be able to solve all problems. But I think the objective is that if everybody contributes towards a solution, perhaps a solution can be found.
So in interest of time, I think we have to wrap this panel up. Thank you all panelists for your valuable insights. Thank you so much.